Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Just Three Workplace Gurus, a podcast about the real world of work. I'm Mike.
I'm Amy.
I'm Vivian.
So, our listeners and subscribers may remember episode 7, which we titled Job Hunting Then and Now, with two recent college grads who happen to be related, one to Vivian and one to me. We've decided to visit the other end of the spectrum today and talk about seasoned workers and their job search. Amy, Vivian, and I are joined by two friends of mine who have been or are now in the job search or are experienced in hiring people in that job search. We welcome Michael Pereira and Mark Gilly to the podcast today. Welcome, guys. So glad to have you. Before we dig in, why don't you each introduce yourselves? Mark, do you want to start and tell us just a bit about yourself?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Mark. I have been in the world of consumer insights and marketing for most of my career. Had the opportunity to work on great things like Captain Crunch and Life Cereal, all the way to Liquid Plumber. So I've covered.
That's a weird combo.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of say it's a little bit of an odd combination there. And then after spending time in consumer goods, I worked at Red Lobster for, 11 years. So it took all that information and learning that I had from consumer packaged goods into the restaurant hospitality space, which actually was very, very interesting because it added a complexity that's a little bit different from selling a product. Anyway,
Totally different. Yeah.
Very different. I've been looking for work hard for about the past year, and it's not been that easy. So that's my story.
You definitely want to delve into that because we're hearing this across the board. So yes.
Michael?
Yes, my name is Michael Pereira. I've been in corporate real estate and workplace for over 20 years, mostly in high-tech companies. I started on the consulting side in engineering and eventually made my way internal to companies, working on global portfolios, large $100 million projects, facilities operations, and eventually made my way to the head of the department, where I'm now working on all kinds of fun events and projects. Now with return to workplace or return to office, as people are calling it, new challenges on trying to be creative on really supporting employees and what their needs are. My focus is really on hospitality and workplace experience, as people need different ways of being innovative, collaborative, productive, really at any place, Starbucks, home, in the office, etc. And more of my focus and where I'm really excited and what we're doing the podcast is on the mentoring and coaching piece. So I love working with career opportunities and helping people grow their careers.
Love it.
Cool. Well, let's dive in here. So, Mark, you mentioned how long you've been looking, a little over a year, and that it's really challenging. What are those challenges? Do you think it's, where you are, the level that you're at? Is it, pardon the expression, but we're actually just a few weeks apart in age, your age? Is it location? Is it, you and I have talked about this personally, the experience that you have, or maybe the evolution of what people are asking for. What is it?
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot to answer in that question.
Sorry.
No, that's in fact, I'm trying to think where to start. I think a lot of it is just that there aren't that many jobs. They're kind of hard to find right now. I mentioned to some folks before that it seems to be a little bit of a white collar recession in some ways. People who have jobs are the ones who typically are getting the jobs, but there are not that many out there, at least in the marketing and consumer insight space. And then I think that there's also for me, it's the level of experience. And so I'm willing to, take a step down, but a lot of folks kind of look at that as, well, you're going to do that, and then you're going to get a job and then start looking for a new one the minute you get there. So I don't think I would do that, but it's kind of hard to, convince somebody. And then the other thing is, Michael, you mentioned location. Being in Orlando is not so great. If you want to work in a amusement, theme park, that's wonderful. Want to work for Disney or Universal. I'm actually thinking about maybe being somebody who just like locks you into your seat when you go on some roller coaster at Universal.
Why not?
Maybe that could be a good job.
It's
Oops,
entertaining.
opinion exactly the right way.
I've known Mark a long time, and I guarantee there's a slight bit of sadism in that job. He'd have some fun. Just
Oops. Oh, yeah, at the last minute. Oh my God, let me check that again to make sure it's right.
I wanted to comment on something you said, Mark, because I think your suggestion that that middle manager role, stepping down into a middle manager role, is a challenge. More than once, I've interviewed for a job like that where someone has said to me, you know, I'm never leaving here, so it's not as if you're going to get my job. Like, why? You know, I literally had someone say that, and then I knew I wasn't going to get that job.
Oh, interesting.
On the other hand, Michael, this was quite some years ago, but we had a conversation where you reached out to me and said, hey, I have this role. You'd be working for me. You'd be doing this, this, and this. I think this would be cool. Didn't work out for a million reasons, but I appreciated that openness to discuss it, and the offer was awesome. And I'm not opposed to that. I think once you've sort of achieved something, at least this is my perspective, I'd love to see what you all think. You don't necessarily need it anymore. Okay, I'm sort of at the top of my game. I've been the director of real estate or VP or whatever it is. I don't need to do that again. I could go do with something that I really love somewhere in the middle and work for someone that I really like. And I do think that's an option, but many people don't feel that way on the hiring side.
Well, and I think with that is how to be introspective, right? So when you're a seasoned professional, you know what your strengths are and you know what your weaknesses are. And if you can go into a position and respect the strengths of that hiring manager or whomever you're going to be working with, and they respect your strengths, it could be a really great team approach.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you touched on a big part of any job search is the networking piece, right? You can't just, or I shouldn't say you can't, but it's hard to go out there and just blow your resume out to 5,000 companies and expect to get hired. Usually either getting into a company from, you know, not necessarily your first level of people known in LinkedIn, but second or third. You know, most of the time when I'm looking for people, I'm not just going to go and hope that I find, you know, a diamond in the rough of 30,000 resumes that come in for a role. You're looking for that Michael Farrell or whoever that is going to be referred into your organization, that, or somebody you worked with who you know their strengths. That's really hard for someone, to your point, fresh out of college. But networking is such a big part of our industry, in any industry really, as well as trying to find the right role.
Absolutely.
So
Sorry.
yeah, it sounds like there's an interesting mix of, especially if you are experienced and you've been doing what you do and you're reaching a certain level. I think, Mark, you hit it on the head. There's going to be less opportunities than, hey, you know, a younger person who's freshly starting,
Right.
who may be like, hey, I want to go into this field, but is going to be much more open to a lot of different potentials to be able to climb that ladder and eventually get to Weber. So you're facing something very different than, I think, sort of an entry person, right?
There's just not that many of these senior level jobs. And so when you say, for example, that I'd be happy to be a director instead of a vice president, they're like, well, then the age thing kind of starts to kick in, where you're going to be sitting there you're not going to go anywhere after that. Or you're going to block somebody. So it's kind of a mishmash of things coming from multiple directions that are just making it a little bit challenging.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if this is comforting or depressing, I don't know, but I literally know 4 people, and they're in different stages of their career. One is smack in the middle, one is a little bit more in the re-entering the workplace from doing his own thing. The other one is fresh out of college. But and to your point, Michael, they were saying when they do the whole resume thing. So one of my friends who's sort of re-entering the workplace said this last year he put out about 600 or 700 resumes, and the year before, this is going on for a while, you know, also about like 400 or 500. And he said out of that he got maybe 7 interviews, and out of the 7 interviews he got ghosted on 6 of them. And he's like, you know, he was like, I think I went back to therapy to be like, is it me? You know, another friend, wonderful, amazing, so hireable. This woman, same thing, like 900, almost 1,000 resumes, just like spent a year looking, and then finally landed her dream job. So like, but I also wonder how much these like AI bots that are fielding those resumes
Oh yeah.
are really interfering. Because
Yeah,
from what I understand, yeah. So Michael, can you speak to that? Do you know anything about
yeah.
that?
When you put a job description out there, right, you're looking for obviously someone to fit that. And what most people don't realize is they put out 600 resumes and they're identical, as opposed to what they're looking for a specific job and then catering their resume to that. And it's not just, are you
Mm.
doing and you having those kind of titles. The big piece is really today, even just looking at verbiage, right? So the AI bots are not great at saying, hey, look, I work with XYZ company who's a vendor. But in our industry, we might call it a service provider because we're calling them kind of a higher level of a supplier. But if the job description says vendor and you put on your resume service provider, it's not going to match up that you had that kind of experience. And so it's
Oh,
really
interesting.
difficult you have to cater each
Okay.
resume to making sure whatever specific words, right? You can say I'm a system designer as opposed to really good at or reporting, but they're looking for someone who's got advanced Excel training. And if you don't have advanced Excel training, those are the kind of networking pieces
Mm.
and places in your resumes that you just won't even get to the hiring manager to have them look at your resumes.
Right, you're just gonna be. It's gonna throw
Really
you
hard,
out.
really
That's
hard, especially for someone just fresh out of college who doesn't have that expertise to go through and match up a job description to their resume and pump out 600 different resumes to cater to each of those jobs.
so. I'm hearing you saying don't use a blanket resume, and
Right.
blast it out to 100 places. Like really craft your resume to match the job that you're seeking, if it's gonna go that route. But Mark, are you? I don't want to get too nosy, but are you doing a mix of networking versus even a headhunter versus like I'm going to blast my resume out there? I'm just curious where you're going to even like look.
I've reached out to headhunters and had conversations with them. So most of the well, every time they said we don't have anything right now, but they wanted my
Ah,
resume, which is always a weird like. Is that just the polite way of saying, thank you, but no thanks? But
oh, interesting.
but at least I've gotten conversations with them. So that was a little bit more than just to send your resume in. So I'm still, seeing if that's going to, bear any fruit. And then networking, I'm just, I'll be honest, I'm pretty gregarious a lot of ways, but I just hate networking. I just really, 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 really hate it.
Um, okay.
Because it
Well,
feels like you're begging for a job or I don't know. But I know I have to do it. So I do it as much as I can.
well,
Mark, are
I
you
don't.
a
Sorry. Go ahead.
remote worker? Like, are you looking for a remote position or
Yeah,
are you
well,
in an
actually,
office? And is that challenging one way or another?
I'm very flexible. Like we've been in Orlando since 2009, and there's no intention of living here in retirement. Um, so, even to the point of telling people that I would self relocate,
Yeah.
so I don't need them to pay for it. Um, as long as it would be in a place that I would consider as a place that I would want to be, at that retirement age.
Hmm.
So, for example, my career grew up in Chicago. I would love to go back and work in Chicago because I would see myself retiring there, which
Yeah.
I know people think you're crazy. Like, why would you want?
No, I'm in New York. It's a great place. Cities are a great place to retire.
Well, absolutely. And, even though people love, oh, the weather in Florida is so great. Yeah. Have you been here in July and August? Not so much.
That's so great.
Yes. Well,
Exactly.
some of us would like him to come back to California, but that's purely selfish on my part.
Well, just find me a job and I'll come back.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it seems like he's flexible.
Well, let me ask you a question, Michael. Like on the hiring side of it, because there's pros and cons. I mean, at the end of the day, there's many variables that make somebody say, "Okay, join the family. You're the right fit. Skill set, personality, compatibility, blah 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 blah." Because I also hire people here at PBE, right? And my team does, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different factors. We know that. But there's pros and cons to someone who's seasoned and someone who's not seasoned. Um, Could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. Whether you're on the hiring side or if I'm out looking for my next opportunity, right? Most hiring managers and frankly recruiters, as they're trying to kind of whittle that down to the people that they're going to give to those hiring managers, they're looking for specific things. So to your point, you got to know the job, right? You got to have the hard skills. You got to have the technical ability to do whatever
To
that
do
you.
the job.
The second piece, which is probably sometimes even more important, is the soft skills. Do people like you? Are you likable? In a half an hour video call, are people going to like you? And if you're not able to demonstrate that they're, even if you have the skills technically,
Yeah.
there's a huge amount of people on the market right now. And so they're going to look for someone who might not have as good of hard skills, but maybe really good soft skills. And in
I
those
can
soft
learn them. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I can learn the hard skills. But in the soft skills, it's not just being likable, obviously, but being able to do communication, being able to present to a large crowd, being able to work on projects and influence people, work with your peers, work with people, that are above you and direct reports. Those are huge. And trying to find that is very difficult, obviously. And that's why some companies take 2 or 3 months to get through, because they want that right person. And if you can't demonstrate that, and again, a half an hour video call, you won't get into the office to actually meet them and do these day long, multi-meeting, 15 people that they've got to meet, conversations. And that's really difficult.
Interesting. Yeah. And I would say that even though I'm not looking for a job as a consultant company, I'm always looking for clients. So
Right.
to go back to the networking thing, like networking events, I think I'd rather die than go to one of those. Like that very, at me, who's like this blabbermouth, I have a shy side. And so if I go alone to like conferences or I go like to these networking events, I feel like I just sort of shrink. And I just feel awkward. I don't know how to put it. But
So
I feel like, I'm sorry, but I feel like networking through colleagues, peers, LinkedIn, I have found is like a gold mine for networking. I have found ways that feel comfortable and that I can sort of thrive in. So I wonder, Mark, if that's part of like the
Yeah.
networking thing. You know what I mean? Like finding that way to network, because it is vital, in a way that like, okay, this sits well with me, as opposed to like, I'm going to go to one of these mixer things and like,
Yeah.
and people, and other people love these mixer things. So, I think it
Not-
varies. Amy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, Mark, I feel like in your position, yeah, I don't think these networking events, may not be the most comfortable thing for you, but
Right.
I would imagine you have a lot of positive experiences of people in your industry from the past and people who want to help you. And it may not be the right moment in time, but just constantly staying present with them and
Yeah.
letting them know, hey, I'm still looking, because there's that one day when somebody else says to them, hey, I've been looking for this person, and you want to be on the forefront of their mind. And
Absolutely.
people want to help people that they've had good experience working with. And so
Yeah.
looking at it not necessarily as a networking thing, but they've had good experience, you've had a good partnership, just stay present with those people.
Yep.
And that opportunity, I feel like, will hopefully come up. I was going to ask the question on just as being a seasoned person, and I know when I was going through the interviewing process, sometimes they're like, oh, you're overqualified. And that hurt. Like, I don't want to be overqualified. I actually really think I want this job.
Right.
Please don't overqualify me. Right.
Yeah, like.
Well, I guess
so-
the question is, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Like, why are you saying that?
Well, then you're
Because
going to be bored and jump as soon as you have a job, and then you'll start looking for another one.
But
But maybe
in the
that's not
modern
what we
world, I
want.
don't think that's unusual. I mean, people don't stay at jobs.
Is that a
very long.
euphemism
So
for
what are you
you're going to
talking about?
cost too much, or you're going to be bored here?
Maybe.
Because I don't think we
Maybe.
can challenge you enough. You're a PhD, you have 40 years experience, you have whatever the qualifications are. Maybe it's a combination? I mean, what did you think? What happened when that was said to you, Amy? Did you get that job?
No. But
Oh.
I feel like it was a judgment call that shouldn't have been made. Like,
Right.
because sometimes maybe we don't want to do what we were qualified to do before.
That's
We want to
interesting.
take a step back and not,
Yes.
I can say for myself, especially pre-COVID, which I hate saying that in general, but there were things I was doing that were not sustainable or balanced. And sometimes you do want to take a step back and say, no, I actually really enjoyed this part of the job, and that's what I want to do again. I don't want to go back
Hmm.
to maybe being a VP or whatever that might be.
Right.
I wanted to go back to the networking comment, Amy, because it was quite a few years ago. Pre-COVID, I was looking for a job, and I wrote an article for LinkedIn about my experience, which was I sort of treated the job search like a job, and
Nice.
you know, I had a plan about getting exercise every morning and then being at the computer at some time every day. And, sometimes it was an hour, sometimes it was 3 or 4 hours. But the other thing that I always did back in the day when you could more easily do this, or the world was different, plan to be over. In my case, we live in Santa Cruz, so I go over to the valley. To be over the hill at least twice a week, doing something, having lunch with somebody, dropping by somewhere, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Post-COVID, when I was looking for a job before I came to the current employer, I did the same thing, basically Zoom related. Like I tried to book time to talk to friends in the industry at least once or twice a week. I mean, I think probably to some degree, Vivian and Amy, you'll agree that's kind of the beginning of how we got to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just those
Yeah.
regular conversations. And so anything I could do to stay connected to the industry and to my friends, it didn't matter whether it was job related or not. I think to the point that Amy made, just those conversations regularly kept me connected and kept me thinking at some point somebody's going to say, I know something. I know about something. It also reminds me, I mentioned this in a off podcast conversation the other day with Michael. He and I were looking for jobs at a similar time a few years ago. And along with a couple of other colleagues, we are kind of a close-knit bunch of people. And we would call each other and say, hey, I heard about this thing. This sounds more like you. I don't think it's right for me or whatever. Like there was a lot of support around helping our friends get a job in one way or the other. And anyway, I found that all really heartening that we were wanting to support each other and help. And so the reason I bring it up is I think there are different kinds of networking, and that is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, Amy, Michael, and I were all at an event 2 weeks ago, hanging out with a bunch of our colleagues, and I always think this when I walk into a room like that. There were probably 10 people. I never talked to Michael. Like we saw each other across the room 5 times and just never.
Is he talking about everybody else?
Yeah.
Talking to it.
Well, they were basically throwing us out of the building at 7:30, so we had to leave anyway. But I always missed a few. I did get a chance to spend a few minutes with Amy. But,
Yeah. Oh, but there were a lot of people I missed that night, for sure. I don't know. Sometimes the layout or something.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway.
what you're talking about really, Michael, is your personal brand, right? And
Right.
I will do these lectures in colleges and such and talk to the students all the time and say, what does your personal brand look like? And it could be your online presence, as you mentioned at LinkedIn. It could be when you're at networking, right? And sometimes they're negative, right? You go to these events and you're like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so, like I would never want to work with them, right? As a certified to end users. But to your point, Michael, I think, having that, whether it be the networking side, whether it be your LinkedIn profile, whether it be your resume, whether it be whatever social media you have out there, that personal brand, it follows you, and you want to have a positive one. And it's really hard to try to get, hired. And I've been very lucky in my career where, to your point, Michael, people have called me and said, hey, so-and-so's, this company's looking. Are you interested? Or they're headhunting.
Right.
And that doesn't happen if your personal brand's not out there. And to your point, I think you said, if when that opportunity of something that you love, that particular role, and you're not on the top of someone's mind to say, hey, did you call so-and-so? It makes it really hard for, those opportunities, because you can't be looking all the time and online to all the websites and finding them. You have to get that, and other people that are going to be like, hey, I'm not interested, but are you interested in blah, blah, blah. And that's when we do as Michael was saying, or Mike was saying, the jumping from different, because it shifts. Everybody's looking, and there's probably a lot of execution type roles, kind of manager, individual contributor. There's a ton of roles out there of just keeping the lights on and doing the normal stuff, but not a lot to what Mark was saying is the strategic. If there's only one at your company, it's really hard to find those.
Yeah.
And especially when there's a huge amount of people that are on the market and they're very qualified. And there's not a lot of people hiring right now.
Well, I have a question for you, Mark. Have you considered consulting and doing your own gig?
Yeah, funny that you would say that. So there's a friend of mine that we're working together. We've actually have trademarked a company named Lumen Strategies.
Fantastic.
The idea of bringing light to your business issue. I'm surprised that no one's taken it yet. In a consulting.
What's it called? Lumen?
Lumin, Lumin.
That's very clever.
So we're getting the trademark. We're putting together a capabilities deck. So the plan is by the next month that we'll start looking for clients.
Well, the reason I say that, first of all, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is this more like, hey, if you have a product you're bringing to market or existing products, whatever it might be, you're going to help?
Yeah, I mean, it would be so my friend has got the same level of packaged goods experience that I do. In fact, it's pretty funny. When I was working on Liquid Plumber, he was working on Drano. And
That's great.
Who knew that we
unclog your whatever.
Yes. On the other side of that brand. So we'll see. So we have creative done in regard to what our logo looks like.
Right.
We have our LinkedIn profile is being worked on right now by a former creative executive that we both have worked with in the past. So I'm beginning to think that this is going to be the path.
I'm quite happy to hear that. Now, somebody who has my own company, my husband and I joke when people say like, "Oh, how did you start your own company?" We both joke and say, "Well, we needed a job." Right? And so we created a job. So that's a super viable path. And sometimes, like I just met with somebody yesterday who's now like global manager or whatever, but he had his own consulting company, which is how he landed a big job, which then led to other big jobs. So it can go both ways. You could be like, hey, I'm just going to go this route and maybe have some more flexibility, blah, 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 blah. Or that might even lead to the job you weren't even looking for anymore.
Right.
Or a long-term consulting, who knows? Like that. So anyway, that's good. So
I have a question. Sometimes we talk on our podcast about wellness. And I think, going through this process, you probably have a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And I was wondering, from your perspective, any advice or things that you've been doing to kind of keep yourself focused on continuing the search?
That's a really good question. Yeah.
I mean, it literally is making sure you take time for yourself. So, I still walk the dogs every day, multiple times. In fact, one of the dogs won't do her business until you get to the absolutely perfect place, which is not too close by.
Hopefully not somebody's front yard that has a camera with next door activity.
No. I'm really good about that, making sure that that's not the case. And luckily, we're walking a lot of trails around here that you can go to that it makes it safe. But that's I think the number one thing, and making sure that find ways to let the stress come out. So exercise is a big one for sure. Talking with friends, taking opportunities to travel when we can.
Yeah.
So all of that kind of helps. And I mean, I'm lucky because our savings is good enough that I can do that stuff, but it helps kind of break the intensity of, just focusing on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And you're also doing some volunteer work and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I'm doing volunteer work. In fact, I just came back from that. Today I do mainly Friday mornings, but they're getting me to come in. It's for a homeless resource center. And so we do a lot of food pickup, a lot of clothes delivery, that kind of thing. So that's kind of fun.
And Michael, I've heard you say this a few times in this podcast, and I know we're coming on time here, but I feel like your message is a sort of stay positive message. Present yourself positively. Have a positive personal brand. So be that person people want to work with. Can you just maybe give a little advice on that, ending advice on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, to your point, Michael, I think you talked about it. Finding a full-time job is a full-time job. And it is a job, though, and it is business. And I agree completely. It can be very humbling. You can be out there looking and only get, of 700 resumes, you get 7 calls and only one actually that gets back to you, right? And in business, right, as you well know, in sales and such, you could get 700 no's before you get a yes. But that you're not upset by that. You just know that and you're going into it that way.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
you take it very personally when they don't get back to you. And frankly, I think companies need to do a better job during the hiring process, because it is the first thing you learn about a company, whether you end up getting hired or not. If the company overall, the recruiting team, the talent team, the hiring manager don't get back to you, it's very difficult for you to be like, yeah, I want to go work for that company.
Right.
That's true. It cuts both
things-
ways. That's
it
very
does.
true.
Yes.
It's the company brand to that point. And are you having a good experience? Are people getting back to you? When you went on site, did they give you a keychain or something? It's not a big cost to the company, but even returning your call and same was, again, I'll go back to sales.
Well, this company cares. Yeah.
Yeah, you want a quick no rather than 6 months of maybe,
Yeah.
or you
Right.
want somebody to say, oh, let's keep you informed. So when we get to a decision, we let you know either you got it or we made a decision about somebody else. You don't want to just be ghosted. And
I
that's
think you're
really-
right. And this ghosting thing is a popular thing.
but it's
unfortunately.
humbling to your point
It is.
when
Yeah.
you're on both, and it's hard.
I think that point that you make, Michael, about it being, the whole process beginning to end ought to be positive, and we ought to be thinking about it.
Yeah. So
Hey, I want to thank you both for
Yes.
Joining. It was great to see you, and
Thank you.
I appreciate your feedback. Thanks so much. Have a
thank
great
you so much
day.
and good luck.
You. Good luck to
Okay.
each of you.
Have a
Take
good
Bye.
day.
care.
All right. Take
Bye.
care.